video, I want to share a little bit about what I've been studying on the line of knowledge and being in George Gurdjieff's studies. Gurdjieff, if you're familiar with his books, you've already heard this. There are two lines along which man's development proceeds, the line of knowledge and the line of being. In right evolution, the line of knowledge and the line of being develop simultaneously, parallel to and helping one another. But if the line of knowledge gets too far ahead of the line of being, or if the line of being gets ahead of the line of knowledge, man's development goes wrong, and sooner or later it must come to a standstill. And he has a few more statements that he's clearly talking about something a little bit deeper than what it sounds like on the surface. And a couple of those statements he emphasizes knowledge depends on being. A man's knowledge depends on the level of his being. He warns that if you have too much knowledge, it becomes harmful. Now you've got more problems, more difficulties than you had to begin with. He says a change in the nature of knowledge is possible only with a change in the nature of being, which is kind of the core emphasis of the work. Your background comprehension, you know, if people read a book and they say, oh, I read the book again and I got something new from it. They got something new from it because their being has changed. And now the understanding faculty that's processing the knowledge is different. So there's a normal application of this teaching, which is like the correct application of this teaching that I take a look at here. The teaching that it's in all esoteric teaching. It's when you take the hidden, it's when you take your thoughts and you apply them with action. And if you apply what's within you to your knowledge, take action, the result of that could be understanding. So you could say applied knowledge plus being equals understanding. And understanding in the esoteric is always the goal. It's always the resulting energy or substance that you hope to gain. And it's not necessarily a foolproof process. You could fail this process. You could mess it up and not correctly create the understanding. But I'm looking at this a bit differently as I look back and said the way Gurdjieff presented this, he was explaining the Enneagram. He made this statement that I've really focused on, that the words know thyself are at the center of many systems, and he's presenting a system, and that system is a symbol, and the symbol is composed of lines, and he started off by telling us that the two lines are knowledge and being. So I've started looking back at that and really taking a look at if there's more to that, and I'll share a different way you can do this in a different video. Just starting with the line of knowledge and being here, if we take a look at what was said, you could have too much knowledge and not enough being. And what would the results of that be? Well, if we were to take those two lines and put them together, and we take into consideration know thyself, well, if we intersect them, we have knowledge on one side, one line, being on the other line. And then we could imagine what would be on the other end of that. I would imagine the opposite of knowledge would be ignorance. But according to Gurdjieff, if knowledge exceeds your being, what you have is imagination. Or if you take in too much knowledge, the way I think of it is there's nowhere for that knowledge to go, and if you put in too much to process, if you put in more than you can digest, it's going to overflow, and you're going to, where's it overflow to? Where else does it have to overflow to? So all of a sudden you're hallucinating these images that aren't in the real world. We call that imagination. So that idea, if you take it for what it's worth, or take it at face value, it would say that it would make sense why people meditating in caves aren't having imagination happening. It makes sense why some people are said to be overactive people. They're consuming massive amounts of information they can't reconcile. It's all spilling out. So that's the result of, if we look at, okay, we've got too much knowledge. If we go the other way, if we have too much being and not enough knowledge, well, I would imagine the result is ignorance. You would have a lot of being, but now you don't know what to do. You don't have knowledge to know what action to take. You don't have the knowledge to know what not to do. I think that would be ignorance, but I don't think this is a perfect equation at this point. Now, if we take all of those together, we end up and we put each of these as an opposite. We have the opposite of being as imagination. We have the opposite of knowledge as ignorance, because that makes sense. We'll just say being. I don't think this is perfect. I think this probably can be improved upon. But for now, we could say non-being and being, even though Gurdjieff emphasized that there's a lot more to being than just non-being, and that's a very simple way to look at it. It's a little bit too simple. Well, let's take a look at what could happen if we take the equation know thyself and we mix this up a bit. Same variables, but we put knowledge, the opposite of knowledge, as the imagination or non-being. Well, I think from that you could say the opposite of having real knowledge is having imagined knowledge. And this is this is interesting to me. I think this would be the real truth here. What do you have when you have knowledge but you don't have being? You just have ignorance. You don't have consciousness. You have a conscious ignorance going on, the absence of being in anything, which can also be called essence. The absence of your essence is going to result in ignorance. So what I'm looking at here is I'm imagining, what if the equation is know thyself? This is what I'm getting out of this. What if know thyself is right in the middle of this? It's right in the sweet spot of being and knowledge. Well, if that's me knowing myself, which is another way, to me, that means I exist. I'm existing. I'm currently knowing myself. I'm currently I-aming. I'm currently me. Well, then I would imagine if I go off in any of these 4, 5, 8, however many directions, what happens? I wouldn't really be me. So going back to those first statements, maybe the reason why Gurdjieff kept emphasizing knowledge depends on being, a man's knowledge depends on the level of his being, maybe there's a hidden aspect of this that's really, I think on a very deep level, saying maybe you need being and knowledge in order to exist. This kind of goes with dependent origination. Things arise together and fall together, and there's an aspect, but maybe take that a step farther. If that's true, if know thyself is this equation and you are, then knowledge is a part of your being, which means it's a part of you. It means that you are knowledge in truth, in who you really are. It would mean that you're not ignorance. That would be somewhere farther away from this equation. You wouldn't just be being. You wouldn't just be knowledge. Well, maybe something like consciousness, as Gurdjieff famously always said, he always would say that you don't have a soul, you have to create a soul. Well, wouldn't it be that if you are not in the middle of this, you're not currently in this moment having a soul. There's no soul happening. There's no soul manifesting. And I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering if in this moment, the sense of the I, the sense of the me, which in the Gurdjieff work, self-remembering, is starting to realize that you, for the most part, most people, they think that they are conscious of having an I and I am, but it's only when you're thinking about it. You're not conscious of the I when you're not thinking about the I, and that practice is to be constantly trying to get a sense of your own presence. Well, if that applies here, you would need to have these knowledge and being checks ticked at the same time in order for a conscious arising to be happening. And you might even say you need it to go correctly. You need the appropriate materials, the appropriate amount of energy to have being, or the access to it, the energy of knowledge, or the ability to have knowledge. And I think there's something to this know thyself. I'll be sharing a bit more about this in my next videos.